For a brief moment in the mid-1980s, overhead run-and-gun shooters were all the rage. Led by major releases like Heavy Barrel, Guerrilla War, Commando, and Jackal, these were the video game equivalent of those cheesy action movies that you were seeing from Sylvester Stallone and Arnold Schwarzenegger. If you're like me and remember those classic shoot-'em-ups, then you're gonna feel right at home with the new game Thunderflash by a developer named Seep. With a rockin' chiptunes soundtrack and 8-bit art design, it's a throwback game that's so authentic that you'll swear that you played it in the arcades back in 1987. But is that enough to hold your interest in 2021? Let's find out. Alright, you know the score. A terrorist organization known as Bloody Wolf is occupying Kashmir, and only a pair of well-trained soldiers is tough enough to shoot their way through an entire army of bad guys. These heroes are Rock and Stan, two 80s action stars who look like they were lifted directly out of Heavy Barrel. Equipped with only a gun and grenades, they fight their way through 5 missions and 25 stages to free Kashmir and kill the terrorists. For those who grew up playing these types of run-and-gun shooters, then you might remember that one of the gimmicks that you often saw was a joystick that you could turn in order to rotate the hero. What we get in Thunderflash is more like the home console port of those games, where we shoot in the direction the character is pointed. I'm sure there was a temptation to turn this into a dual-stick shooter, but Seep has kept the action decidedly old school. In that sense, it feels like the developer had a checklist of cliches that they wanted to hit. We start off fighting through a jungle, take to the air in a jetpack, fight a flying machine on a cliff, kill the bad guys in a war-torn city, race through the waters in a boat, and so on and so forth. If you've played an Ikari Warriors game before, then much of this is going to look familiar. This is a game that wears its inspiration on its sleeve. If you love this style of run-and-gun shooter, then you're probably going to get a kick out of playing through this nostalgia-soaked throwback. For that reason, Thunderflash is almost critic-proof. I could argue that the gameplay feels outdated, aiming your gun isn't always easy, it's full of cheap hits, and the entire affair is painfully shallow. But all that's by design. Those are all things that could have been said about countless arcade shooters in the 1980s, so of course they apply here. I have to imagine that fans of the genre would have been disappointed if the game mixed things up too much. I mean, the appeal is that it looks and feels exactly like the arcade classics you remember. Now, that's not to say that Thunderflash doesn't try to improve on the concept, because it does. This is a longer game than most of the titles it's drawing inspiration from. By having so many stages, the developer is able to mix things up by adding vehicle levels, lots of different bosses, and not one, but 2 fantastic endings. I also like that it includes a harder difficulty and bonus modes, such as a boss rush and survival mode. These are things that you didn't get from the original Commando, not even when it was ported to the Nintendo Entertainment System. As somebody who grew up loving these old school arcade games, I had a lot of fun playing through Thunderflash. From the moment I saw the boot up screen and the pixel graphics, I knew that I was going to dig this game. Instead of trying to reinvent the wheel, Seep is pointing at the wheel and reminding us how awesome it is. This is the kind of game that we rarely see anymore, and even when somebody tries to bring the run and gun action back, they end up modernizing it so much that it barely feels like the same thing. That's not the case here, and that's why it stands out more than most modern throwbacks. That said, so much of this game relies on nostalgia. If you didn't grow up playing these types of games, then there's a real chance that you're going to be left scratching your head by Thunderflash. Why do the heroes move so slowly? Why are the enemies such good shots? Why are the bosses so cheap? Why can't you jump or roll out of the way? Why does the action sometimes slow down? And come on, why are only 2 people taking on an entire army? Look, these are all fair questions, but I would counter that it was the 1980s, and that is how we liked it. Inspired by arcade hits like Heavy Barrel, Ikari Warriors, and Commando, Thunderflash is a run-and-gun shoot-'em-up that is so authentic that you'll swear that you played it back in 1987. With throwback graphics, a great, albeit repetitive, chiptune soundtrack, challenging bosses, and a story that is straight out of a cheesy action film, fans of this style of shoot-'em-up will get a kick out of all the nostalgic nods to the past. I don't know how broad the appeal will be for a game like this, but with a budget price and 2 great endings, Thunderflash is a nice reminder why so many of us have fond memories of the old school arcade. Hey, thanks for watching our review. If you liked what you saw here, then you should know that we post new reviews and features almost every day. Now, here's the question I have for you. What is your favorite run-and-gun shoot-'em-up? Look, it doesn't have to be an overhead shooter like Thunderflash. I mean, personally, I'm a huge fan of Gunstar Heroes and Contra 3, but really, I have a hunch that goes without saying. Go ahead and let me see your picks in the comments below. In other news, we'll be back shortly with a review of the new Toho fighting game, followed by a new episode of 10 Things We Learned this week. If that sounds good to you, then I strongly recommend you click that subscribe button and support what we're doing here. Until then.